Mindset Podcast. We're your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it. We believe in the warrior ethos and support those that choose to walk that path.
What is up? I'm Gene here, and I want to talk about this book that I just read, Prepared by Mike Glover. Don't know if you're familiar with him. This is a great book. So let's just go through it and point out some of the things that I found from it. But first, if you're not familiar with Mike Glover, he's got a couple of podcasts. It's one he's done forever. Mike Force. He does Black Rifle Coffee podcasts a lot. He's been making the rounds recently. You probably saw him on Joe Rogan and Andy Stumpf and all these guys. But he's mostly known for his company Fieldcraft Survival. I'm a pretty huge fan of what they do and him. And didn't know him that well until really the book came out, and I kind of got into it. There's this company here, Fieldcraft Survival. And so what they focus on is preparedness and teaching preparedness, to people, civilians or whatever. So he's a former Green Beret, done a bunch of cool stuff. I don't want to go too deep into his bio. You can go look that up. But anyway, trust me, it is worth the time and effort to get to know him a little bit and check out his book. Anyway, I'll leave it up so you can check it out while we go through this thing. So anyway, I've got the book here, and I wanted to go through some thoughts on this thing. I will make sure and put bio and stuff in the post here, so you can go get that. So I'm making my way through this book. There's some things in here, and he has this one chapter. Let me set something up here. So he has this one chapter, the introduction, where he states the only difference between combat and catastrophe is that combat is a choice, while catastrophe is something that happens to you or around you. And that, honestly, has changed my perception of being prepared. I've always thought of myself as a well-prepared person, like physically, like I train martial arts and I work out and I prep some things in my car when I go on trips, and I like to be the guy that always has, the right tools and things like that. But changing the focus from me to, the environment or things around me happening to me or around me, changed my perspective of how I prepare and how I think about it. So that's if all you get out of this book is that, I think it's worth its price. Honestly, that did it for me. And I've got some notes here that went through, but he has a whole chapter on mindset. And the preparedness is often said, mindset is everything. And I always think that, and it was really cool to hear him and see him kind of reiterate some of those thoughts. And then he has a whole section on the nervous system, right? And explaining those things, the autonomous and the autonomous, I can't pronounce it. Anyway, the two types of systems that sort of regulate your mind and body, right? So the one that's like, whenever you walk, your brain just tells your legs to go forward. You don't have to actually consciously think about that movement or breathing or blinking. And then there's the movements, like my hand right now, I'm controlling it with my brain. So two very different systems that control that. And then how interactions and tragedy or whatever you want to say that you're preparing for sort of affect those systems. And it's very cool to understand those things. And, I had learned about some of those things a while back from a Tony Blauer, doing one of his trainings, and then, talking to him on the show here. And, he talks a lot about weaponizing the nervous system, the startle flinch, which is I don't know which one it is, but it's the uh, part of the nervous system that just reacts. And he talks about utilizing that response and then weaponizing it, using it as a bridge to your martial arts. And there's a lot of that sort of thinking in this book, in this section about that, and I find it fascinating. He talks about the fight or flight or freeze. How there are people who have been known to completely freeze, and he gives some examples, like in some recent-ish mass shootings and things like that, where people froze and as a result kind of hid or played dead and were spared because the shooter thought that they had already been taken care of and stuff. It's kind of grim, but it's worth exploring that for your own you know preparedness and safety. um, there's some other really interesting things in terms of thinking about the body in here too, in training, and I think that's sort of the key, which is you can't train at 100% speed all the time, right? That's 100% speed is the actual thing itself. And if you're training in that modality or that speed or that range or whatever, you're probably going to injure yourself or create long lasting issues. But it's about training in those areas where you can sort of um, erode away at the body's automatic response, or learn what it feels like. And that's very important. And he gives some really good examples of doing that and getting into that. Then there's some then that's a really cool, like, first, I'd say, what is that, like, quarter of the book or whatever. When it comes to that stuff, I think that's a good step up. But there's a majority of this thing is about how to actually plan and prepare and stuff. And I think mostly uh, you're going to get some value out of that as well. There's a section on how to think about planning, and he opened my mind up a good bit too. Every plan and preparedness begins with a simple conversation with your spouse, with your kids, maybe just yourself, right? And it's something I've never done. I've never actually talked to the people in my house about what would happen if there was a certain scenario. I think we have plans, but are they just in my head? Has that been communicated? Has that actually been planned? And you can get really paranoid and go down a rabbit hole with this stuff, but we're talking about bare minimum stuff here, really. And one of the things that I hadn't thought about until was brought up in his book here, along those same lines, is the section, arrogance and willful ignorance are your enemy. And he tells some stories about um, willfully being ignorant or making decisions on whether to investigate something or not, and it being sort of lazy, or not necessarily lazy, but just you wanting to uh, not accept reality, right? So, like, one of the things is, let's say you're lying in bed and you hear, like, a door closing or something in your kitchen or whatever, and no one's in there. But do you just how many times have you actually heard something weird and just written it off, like, oh, that's just the dog or the cat or whatever, and you haven't actually gotten up and investigated it? That's just an example of an area where it could be anything, and you're just kind of not wanting to deal with that reality. um, and a lot of times we do that with natural disasters as well. So we're talking about preparedness, and it wasn't something that I was necessarily putting in the same realm. I'm always thinking about someone attacking my person or my property or the people I love, or zombie apocalypse or something fun like that. Those are always scenarios that you're kind of keeping in the back of your mind, but you don't put. Maybe some people do, maybe you do. I don't know that I have as much as I should. Things like you know floods or hurricanes or tornadoes or things like that. Perhaps if you live in an area where tornadoes are kind of regular, it is on preparedness is for tornadoes is pretty high on your list. But for me, it'd have to be a pretty darn compelling news report about a hurricane or something before I would really respond to it. But any little thing, not any little thing, but anything like that could cause damage to your home. It could cause you to lose power. It could cause all kinds of things. And if you're from the South like I am, you know that anytime there's like a report of, heck, snow, the grocery store is out of, milk and bread for weeks. It's just how it is, and it's weird. But, what is your preparedness level for those things? And it made me just kind of take stock. And then, situational awareness. There's a good chapter on situational awareness, and that's something that I always kind of pride myself on, but I wasn't as good as I thought I was based on, what he was recommending here. I've read, I can't remember the name of the book, but there's a great book about, and he references in here too, which was really cool to see that he's referencing a book that I'd read, but it was about these Marines in Fallujah, I think, and the way they were needing to learn how to discern what was, danger or not danger based on people. And one of the examples, and I don't remember if it's actually in the book or one of the podcasts that he's been on, but one of the examples was that these Marines would go into a town, and everyone would be like, flipping them off and mad and everything like that. And at first, that seems like the thing that cues them into there's danger. But then after a while, they notice, well, that's like that everywhere, except this one time we go into town and there's this one guy who's like, really excited that we're there. And all of a sudden, that's the anomaly. And that's the person that they need to go check out after, some experience interacting with these people. So one of the things in, situational awareness is he talks about recognizing the spike in the graph, right? So we're talking about a graph and there's like a spike, and then like that's the outlier. So looking for the outliers, and it depends, right? And that's a great answer for anyone that does self-defense or preparedness or whatever. It depends, right? It depends because what you're looking for in any situation is anything out of the ordinary. You're trying to spot the anomaly, the guy going up the down escalator, or as I call it, spike in the pattern, right? And which is kind of ingenious to think about. Creating a baseline, right? And then what doesn't fit in that baseline. And that requires some assumptions and some, knowledge and things like that. But that's, if you're trying to build good situational awareness, kind of part of some of the things you should be doing or working on building the skills for. One of those things is he's got the 5s and 25s. And I heard that from someone else who was in the Army. And they were telling me about the 5s and 25s, and I thought it was cool, but it was never really explained like this. So it's a security protocol that we call 5s and 25s. The moment we stop, every person in the patrol scans a 5-meter radius around their position, ideally without yet exiting the vehicle or whatever they're getting out of. Once that area is cleared, we push out to 25 meters, scanning the whole way. Logic is straightforward. It's based on experience on millions of miles driven by American military personnel during Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Rocky Freedom. So, it's a way to sort of scan the environment, the 5 meters and the 25 meters, like whatever you want to think about, 8 feet and 10 feet, whatever, 12 feet, however you want to think about distance, but it's to break those things up. And, even a lot of like hunters, if you're hunting, and you're looking at a long distance, you'll sort of create a grid and sort of scan in the grids and stuff like that, because you're not necessarily, looking for the thing you're hunting just run across your vision. You might be looking for clues to where they might be and things like that. So that applies to situational awareness as well. Think about that. How many times have you gotten out of your car after you've parked it to go into work and you're just looking at your phone, or you've just gotten out and not really paid attention? I mean, how often do you actually look out the window and sort of scan the environment to see who might be around your vehicle before you even get out, before you unlock the door? The same can be said going to your vehicle, right? what kind of scanning are you doing walking towards that vehicle? Are you looking around it, down, around the corners? Like what's happening? Just taking stock of that and trying to see what you're doing. And then again, he hits you with this denial is the biggest threat. It sounds absurd, but that when faced with a grievous threat to your safety, you might deny its existence. Except almost everyone does it. It's practically a cultural script. Right. And there was that example he was talking about with the window noise downstairs. Yeah. That's a big one. All right. So then this one thing here about some vernacular that he uses, which I think is just really cool. It's called get off the X. And this kind of goes back to some of the stuff with Tony Blauer I was talking about, where get off the X. So more realistic are those scenes in movies like The Bourne Identity and shows like The Terminal List. He's talking about, the difference in some of these new action movies like John Wick and stuff like that. It's always a simple line like, we've got to move or we can't stay here. I mean, you hear that in movies, and he's saying that's a very realistic thing, which is what they're taught is a term, getting off the X, right? Before you do anything, before you activate the first steps of your escape plan or your, whatever little system you're using to respond to threats and stuff like that. Or as better yet, as you activate them, you've got to get yourself out of the crosshairs and away from the current danger as best you can. Right. That's important to actually get off the X, to actually move and do something, like when we're talking about that startle flinch reaction, it's, after I deploy my airbags or whatever that, Tony Blauer likes to call them, what's my next move? But that's getting off the X. That's reacting. That's doing something. And in a moment of crisis like that, doing something is often better than nothing. And he's got some examples about that. And then there's a large part of the book that is mostly about how to prepare, like literally how to, think about your vehicle, think about your home, think about the homestead, he calls it, think about, what's on your person. He goes through some EDC, some everyday carry type scenarios, which I do want to get into on the show and look at some EDC type things for me or some of my other friends, because, that's something that we do think about and utilize. And again, EDC stands for everyday carry. There are some other considerations too that I've kind of gotten into. So so there you go, right? That's all in my opinion. If you listen to the show, probably think that that's pretty cool stuff, right? Preparedness and being prepared and being situationally aware, harnessing your brain chemistry, and training that to eliminate, freeze response or your stress tolerance. That's a good thing to work on in training, thinking about properly fortifying your home or your car or whatever for bad situations. First aid is another giant area that he focuses on a lot that I think is super important to just self-defense and community defense. But there's some legit criticisms of this stuff. And, I'm sure that Mike Glover, I'm sure he encounters these all the time with, the online world that he lives in. So, focusing on preparedness and living that lifestyle can be very advantageous, right? Helping individuals and communities with their resilience and being ready with emergencies and stuff. But it has its critics, right? So one of those is, paranoia and fear, right? Critics are arguing that, if you focus too much on that, you can seem paranoid or whatever. And that's like everybody in, these movies and stuff that, they always seem kind of paranoid. Like if you watched, The Last of Us, you got Bill in his bunker under his bunker, another is like a financial burden, right? So buying all this stuff and being ready to, survive a catastrophe like that, right? It's going to cost you some money, right? Well, yeah, but maybe it's a good idea to evaluate your priorities, right? And again, misplaced priorities. Not just the money, but the time and energy spent on this stuff could be better used somewhere else. Social isolation, being paranoid can lead you to be, sort of socially weird or ostracized, or, if this is something that you're always thinking about. And then potential for escalation, right? So if you take all this stuff to the extreme, you can wind up responding to things in ways that has you disconnected from reality, right? You might overly react to some scenarios, and those are all valid, I think, and probably some of the knee-jerk reactions that you get when you hear words like, prepared or even prepper, but he has the whole section in there about how this, you shouldn't be a weirdo. Like he literally says that word, like, don't be a weirdo. Like, do all this stuff in moderation, do it over time. Just start getting off the X and doing something, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just restocking your Band-Aids, something. And I think that's super important. And, you don't have to be a weirdo. You don't have to be a weirdo prepper for working on the prepared mindset. I like to think I'm not that weird. Maybe I am, but we'll see. If you think I'm weird, tell me so in the comments, and we'll have a good time. But there you go. It's just a quick review of this book. I think you should get it, and it'll change your perspective on a lot of this stuff, which I think is very healthy in the end. So go grab the book, Prepared by Mike Glover, and catch you next time.